Writing a novel about a world frozen under the weight of grief and abusive magic has been a journey. Today I wanted to share with you where I am in my process of writing Where Magic Slept, what's working, what's not working, and kind of what happens when I almost quit. Welcome to Writing Through It. I'm Eric, and today I want to update you on the progress I'm making with writing my novel. The title of my novel is Where Magic Slept. It is a dystopian novel, a fantasy novel, where this character Bram is in this frozen world, cursed by the forever winter, and it's a journey of trying to survive that world while also understanding that magic once existed and can exist again, and a lot of other themes. And part of the process that I've been going through is understanding what those themes are, because when I write, I tend to start with a small world and expand it over time. Really singular, just a man on the snow, and then getting to know what his experience of this world is through how the environment, highlights some of his internal struggles. With that, it gets really easy to get lost in all the weeds of every single detail that I can go into in every aspect of his personality and experience and his flaws and his strengths early on, and also feed you the lore of the world and help you understand why and what this is. And that has been challenging. It's been challenging in a way that I actually stopped for a little bit and started writing something else just to shake it off, because I felt like I ran into this roadblock. And for me, in the past, maybe I'd quit when that roadblock appeared, but what I've realized is the thing I was pursuing is good. I need to shift gears and focus on something else just to kind of reset and get the creative juices flowing. And I'll come back to that thing later. That's been a big change for me, is coming back to the things that I value after I've taken a break to reinvigorate myself. And that tends to clear up the confusion, the writer's block, whatever you want to call it. And that becomes a very exciting process. I don't know if you've had the experience, but when you solve a problem in your creativity that has been haunting you, it is one of the most cathartic experiences ever. I do get goosebumps when these moments happen. I actually had one this morning when I made a little connection of, it's just a line or two, or just a concept that happens that so wonderfully encapsulates the metaphor of what I'm trying to utilize this one narrative device to accomplish. And until this morning, I didn't really have it fully fleshed out in a way that it kept it moving forward. It kind of stopped maybe in chapter 4, but now in chapter 7, I know how I'm going to bring it and move it forward. At its core, the themes are things of loss, of grief, the weight of that grief as it follows us forward, and the act of letting go being the ultimate way we are able to move forward. And that isn't just a simple, thing to do, but it's a process and a journey we go on. And once we go through it, we realize we can finally let go. This is what drives Bram, the main character. And there's also this balance of power that runs through the story as well, about taking and giving back, and how when we only take, we create this imbalance, which leads to a lot of terrible consequences. And right now, I just wanted to celebrate that I don't know, actually. Yesterday I was 31,000 words into the novel, just starting chapter 7, but I added a bunch and adjusted something, so that word count might have gone up by a couple thousand. So I probably should have looked at that before I sat down and recorded, but I didn't. But going into chapter 7, I decided to go back to chapter 1 and read my book through. It allowed me to understand how bloated chapter 1 is, but that's the nature of the first draft. You're going to go through and you're going to chunk out things and get it on paper. Sometimes you remove it, like I've removed sections of lore and put it onto a scratch sheet that it'll come back later in the novel, but I don't think it's important to know that now. But some things are important, and that's where it's tough to know. What do you, the reader, need to know? Which is why editors come in to say, I don't need to know this yet. I like this because this sets up this. And that sometimes I can't figure out on my own. So I've been chunking out a few things, removing them. I actually moved one thing for sure to another chapter, which makes it work much better. And I enhanced it by making it fit more into a story, so it feels more like showing and not telling. But there's certainly telling in the novel, and I don't think that's a bad thing. But going from 1st to 6th chapter, finishing them, tightening them up, has really helped me understand chapter 7 and what I want to do next. And I think that's been one of the biggest takeaways I've had, is realizing I'm not going back to chapter 1 to obsess, but I don't want to get necessarily, for me, to chapter 15 and feel like, oh my God, I've got to go back and adjust 15 chapters pretty severely. That's just like a tower of dishes that I don't want to fall right now. So I figured going back, refreshing, making notes so that I don't lose track of themes, because I was doing that where sometimes I'm like, shoot, what was I trying to say with this? And so having my little scratch sheet of a couple of notes that say, here's the general rules of this character, and this character. Here's what I want them to experience. It allows me to better write dialogue and put them in situations during the journey that allows those things to be tested. And I want to tell you some of the stuff that I've really conquered as far as like I was stuck on, but I also really don't, because I do want this book to be discovered by anyone who reads it, and I don't want to tell all the details, but I want to share the process. So hopefully this isn't too vague for you, but it still adds some kind of value. But that being said, there are things that I'm still struggling with. There's certainly bigger questions of later parts of my novel and how I bring the tension and reverse certain things. And I have a lot figured out, but I'm still overwhelmed to think about where this novel needs to go to make it a satisfying ending, as well as rise that tension to the places where I want it to be so that it has emotional impact, while also not revealing too much through foreshadowing or being too obvious, but also not knowing what my readers will pick up on. And not that you can't guess where I'm going, but you want it to be like, even if you guess it, you forget about it, because it's not like something that has turned you off to the novel. Like, I know where this is going. I've read books like that. I don't want to write a book like that. But that's a hard thing to figure out, is in this little nuanced phrase, am I giving too much away, or am I not giving anything away? And I think I am. And so that's something that beta reading will probably help me with. And I just need to kind of let it go, because it's probably not as bad as I think it is. And in fact, it's usually something I'm not considering a problem that actually is the problem I need to address. So I'm trying to let that go, but it is a struggle because I want to figure it out as best as I can. So when I give it to beta readers, when I give it to editors, they don't have to fix this like meaningless mistakes, these amateur things that like, I don't even want to read the rest of it because you didn't even take it seriously, did you? I'm trying to thread that needle. I'm also trying to better develop romance in novels, not romantasy, not a romance novel, but I do believe there's metaphor chances we have to illustrate certain truths through relationship, and how relationships can, between love interests, can really be the thing that is needed to challenge them to grow or fall apart. And I have this happen in the book a couple of different ways. And the first one was satisfying to me. The second one is not developed enough, and it's one that I'm most excited about, and I really want to do it right. And I have some ideas how to do it, and it's developing. But there's always this battle of how do you make it not a will they, won't they, but you know that they're going to, but you also want to put enough roadblocks where it's not this just they're this way, then all of a sudden they're in love, you know? So I'm trying to seed out those details, and that takes a lot of thought too. But I think what I love about other books is ones that can do that really well. That they have all these details where maybe you know where it's going, maybe you know the connection, maybe you see it before the characters do, and that's fun. And then the payoff is once they get there. But at the same time, I don't like when books make it so obvious that if you just talk to each other, everything would be fine and you guys could come together. I'd rather have philosophical differences that make these two characters stay apart or fall for each other, but still it's like this one thing between us we can't get over. You know, in some ways it's like we're just not yoked equally. You are so different from me in this one area that I can't get over it, but maybe I can. And so that's the tension that I'm trying to build. And as far as the next steps for chapter 7, this is a spoiler alert, but this is when the journey really starts. Not that the first 6 chapters are meaningless, but chapter 6 and 7 is a huge pivot in the story, and it's going to have a lot of, you know, that there's no way, you're not coming back after this. You're not going to come back the same after this. Too much has changed, and now you're committing to step across the threshold into this great unknown world that's going to test your hero and make you different. And that is going to happen. And so I'm excited that I finally stepped over that threshold and have a plan going forward, but it is needing refinement. I have a lot to consider. but I'm excited because that's what's next, is a whole lot of unknown with the mixture of this really thin template or structure that I have an outline that I'm trying to follow, because I'm more of a pantser. I'm not big into outlines. I want to be better and bigger into outlines because I see their value, and I think we're all a mix of this pantser versus planner archetype for writing, and I'm trying to balance that both. I don't have a date though that I want to be finished by, because I don't know how long the book's going to be, to be honest. I'm letting it be as long as it needs to be. I would anticipate I would be done this year, you know, and in revisions and reviewing the whole book. But the weird thing about this relationship here between you and me is I'm not a published author. I have no real credibility. I've written a novel, a complete novel, and that makes me so proud that I was able to accomplish that. And no one's read it, but I've read it 5 times and revised it, and I've given it to an editor and they revised it. So I guess someone else has read it and did find value in it. But now when I look back at it, it's not something I really want to share. I could share it. It's just not indicative of the stories I want to tell now. So I would hate to give you this novel and then, hey, head fake, look over here. You know, this is something completely different. And if you like the first one, you probably won't like the second. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe that's just too much assumption. Anyway, but I don't have a time when I want this draft done, the first draft to be done. I would love to tell you it would be early fall that I would be finished, but stuff happens. You know, I think I have a lot of time coming up to write, and I'm excited for it. Right now I'm developing writing habits in blocks of time, and I've really hit a good stride with that, but I'm also trying to still read quite a bit, like 50 pages a day. And that is to inform my writing, to be learning and start to see the things I like and don't like, so that I can ensure I'm not doing the things I don't like in my own writing. But I'm at a point where I'm in a good place. Earlier, I've had these back and forths of wanting to quit and leave it and getting negative on myself, saying this book's probably been written by someone else and written better, and looking at amazing authors and saying, like, I can't write like them. Not remembering that I don't want to write like them. I want to be skilled. I want to be good at writing. I want to communicate truths that allow someone to have an experience, but I don't want to write and sound exactly like the people I respect. And so sometimes I want to walk away. But I'm falling so deeply in love with this story and this world, and I didn't think I'd ever have something like that. I've wanted it for a long time, because I've heard of authors talking about the worlds they create and wanting to live there and spend time there. And I've always had this feeling that, what if I'm creating something I want to exist in for 6 months and then never see that world again? I feel like the amount I have to invest in that world would be too great, because I don't want to stay there for long. But this world is evolving into something that I get goosebumps, and I think about when I'm not writing, and it just makes me so happy. And so that is a gift, and I don't want to walk away from a gift. I want to understand the gift, and I want to be with the gift. That doesn't mean that anyone will ever see this gift. That doesn't mean that anyone will read this gift. But for me, the gift is I'm doing something I care deeply about, and that is wonderful and must sustain me and will sustain me when I want to quit. So that's all I want to say about that today. Let me know in the comments if you've faced this creative block and kept writing, and if you want to follow that journey. This is not something I talk about all the time here, but I will be talking about and sharing with you these vague updates about the process of writing, so that, you know, those who are invested in that and are excited and cheering me on can watch. And if that's you, make sure you're subscribing and liking the video so I know you're there, and I'll keep at it. I hope you keep writing through it. And I'll be sharing my next video about writing through edits with your with your self-doubt, because yeah, it's tough when you open up to other people, but it's vital to the process, and I wanted to give you a little guide on how to develop resiliency around that challenging process. So that's it for this video, and I hope to see you in the next one. Until then, journey well, my friends.